Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, we are coming to everyone live. It's one of our instant reaction shows from the Big Ten Media Days, Day 1, featuring the Ohio State Buckeyes. We know it was featuring the Ohio State Buckeyes because they waited until the very last hour of the day to give us the 3 players that they sent. So the Buckeyes were the main course today. And they had plenty to say, but first, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm great. I don't know why they thought that the opportunity to look at Lovie Smith's beard wouldn't have held us here for the rest of the day. I think that was clearly the number one attraction of the day, but behind that, I guess Ohio State was probably a solid number 2.
You know, I went over to ask Lovie some questions. One question that I asked all of the assistant coaches except for Mike Loxley because I can get into that later. But I found myself like... You know, when he was up there initially, I was thinking, you know what, just if you shave it, you'll look so much younger. Mm-hmm. But then as I'm, 7 feet away from him, waiting to ask him something, I'm like, yes, this works for my grandpa. Mm-hmm. My grandpa Lovie. I love this. And then when I asked him a question, I asked it with love in my eyes. And this is how he recruits. He's a very good recruiter.
Mm-hmm. Well, he talks... This sort of gets to the general trend, the tone of the day, which is everyone is very positive about everything. And Lovie Smith talked repeatedly about how well recruiting was going, and I'm like, I don't know that I remember seeing that. And I went and looked, and they have 3 commits for 2020, and they're ranked 103rd in the nation. So, I mean, that's good compared to how UTEP is recruiting, so that's something. But, this is the time of year when it's time for optimism for everyone.
Well, don't you think, you know what, we can take this back to Ohio State. Part of Illinois' good recruiting is the fact that they finished second to Ohio State for Mookie Cooper. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, you're almost getting there, but I heard somebody ask Lovie, like, when do you turn a corner? He's like, you never know. I don't know. I can't answer that. You might want to.
You should probably answer that soon because your buyout's not getting bigger. So
yeah, but everybody loves Lovie except for maybe Illinois fans. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. If that thing exists, then maybe not. We should probably talk about Buckeyes because I don't think everyone came here to hear about Illinois football.
Yeah, and this will probably be an abbreviated show, knock wood. We talked to Ryan Day. We talked to Jordan Fuller, KJ Hill, and Jonathon Cooper today. Ryan Day we got for 15 minutes initially, then an hour, and that's how this breaks out. Everybody talks for an hour off to the side. And, Tom, honestly, there's so much that I have in my brain right now that it's hard to pull any of it out, which is great for a podcast. But one of the things that I did take note of is when Ryan Day was asked about Justin Fields and how so many people just assume he is the starting quarterback. And whenever Ohio State or Ryan Day or Mike Yurcich says that there is a quarterback battle that is going to happen, people don't believe him. And Day had to say, like, he has not won the job. He has done nothing. He hasn't won the job yet. That's not how things work at Ohio State. Nobody is given anything. And I wish more people... I should say I wish more people would understand this. I wish the people who didn't understand this understood this. Like, yes, Justin Fields is the most talented quarterback on the roster. He still has to play well. And if J.P. Andrade comes out and looks like Dwayne Haskins, J.P. Andrade is going to start. If he looks like Dwayne Haskins. Mm-hmm. Like, whoever looks the best is going to start.
And I think there's probably reason to think that Dwayne Haskins probably is, or sorry, not Dwayne Haskins. He's not here anymore.
J.P. Andrade.
Justin Fields is the guy who is probably going to win that job. I think that you would have to think he's the overwhelming favorite at this point. But what Ryan Day said was Justin hasn't won the job yet, and he said you can't win the job when you're still learning the offense. And he's probably, you would assume, ahead of Gunnar Hoke on learning the offense because Gunnar Hoke got here 6 months after Justin Fields did, and Justin Fields had the opportunity to go through spring practice. And KJ Hill said Justin Fields had learned the playbook before spring practice. And he said, now there's other stuff you got to learn. Just knowing the plays is kind of step number one, and then you've got to figure out the protections, all that kind of stuff, and blitz pickups and all that jazz. But he has at least kind of, according to KJ Hill, completed step one of that process and had before spring ball. So I would be extremely surprised if it was someone other than Justin Fields taking the first snap if Justin Fields is healthy, I think Justin Fields is taking the first snap. But Justin Fields is not yet to the point where Ryan Day is comfortable with having him be the starter. If it was today, Ryan Day would not be completely comfortable with having Justin Fields because he has some more stuff he's got to prove during fall camp.
Although I would say he can't be too uncomfortable with him when he's saying, I want to have the starter named within like 2 weeks of camp. Like 2 weeks into camp, he wants to know who's starting. And if it's just 2 more weeks of practice, that's all he needs to know that it's Justin Fields, then great. So if it goes into week 3, then it gets a little bit concerning. But if he wants to know who it is in the first 2 weeks or at the 2 week mark, then obviously I think he's seen enough of Justin Fields to know that, within 2 weeks he'll have it.
Probably, but there's also, I kind of took that as he's kind of crossing his fingers and hoping that he's seen enough at that point. Because you want to have your leader at that point. KJ Hill said, you want to know who your general is. You want to know who that guy is by the time you're a couple weeks into camp. So you have time, so it's the last couple weeks. So it's not the 2015 thing where they're like in Blacksburg and they're not sure who's going to be the starting quarterback. Because you saw that, and it was, they did the shuffle, and it didn't work out well throughout the year. You want to know who your guy is if you can nail that down.
Cardale didn't know he was starting until they told him to go out for the snap, if I recall.
Yeah, they were like in the stadium on the field, and they didn't know who the starter was. Like that's not the way you want to do that. And that 2015 season just looked so ragged all year, despite all of the talent. And I think there was a multitude of reasons for that, but not having a starting quarterback nailed down prior to literally you're on the field for the starting game, that's part of that process.
I thought one of the more entertaining aspects of the day, no pun intended, would be when reporters who don't cover Ohio State would ask Ryan Day, like, how are you going to change, or are you going to change your approach to the Michigan game? And it may have even been Michigan reporters who cover Michigan.
It was Michigan reporters
asking,
in at least a couple cases.
Are you going to change anything? And Day was like, no. Like, I'm not a stupid idiot. No, I'm not going to change, what works. And it's interesting to me because I talked to you about this yesterday, where I heard a radio interview with a reporter who covers Michigan basically talking about this, saying, I don't know that Ryan Day is going to approach the Michigan rivalry like Ryan Day or like Urban Meyer does, and I think that's going to be a mistake. And I don't how anybody could approach any differently than every head coach from Woody Hayes to now, save for one, Mr. John Cooper. But this is how it's done, and this is what it is to be successful. And I think that was one of the things, like, they said, well, why aren't you changing it? And he said something about 7-0, like 7 wins or something. 7 wins over Michigan. Urban Meyer has proven it. Like, why would you change it? I didn't understand the thought process. Like, are you going to be able to do your own Michigan thing now? Like, you can start something new and something different, but it wouldn't be better. So why would you change it?
Right. But this is the ultimate. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah,
they have won 7 in a row. Several of them have been not close in years when you would have expected it to be close. Yeah. They have won close games. They have won blowouts. They have won at home. They have won on the road. They have won when Michigan was favored. They have won when they were favored. Like, what? Why would you mess with that? I don't think. I pick the dumbest college football coach you could possibly imagine. I don't know that the dumbest college football coach you could possibly... You're thinking of Derek Dooley right now. I can tell. It's okay. It's all right. He has good hair. It's fine. Take the dumbest college football coach. Not even the dumbest college football coach is going to go, you know what? Urban Meyer did it his way, but...
Yeah, just wait.
What does that guy know?
Right. Yeah, it almost felt like wishful thinking.
A little bit, yeah.
Please, sir, tell us that it's not going to be like this anymore. And, maybe it won't, but the approach is going to be the same. And when I was with Jonathon Cooper today, and he was saying the same thing, like there are some differences with between Ryan Day and Urban Meyer. And getting back to that Michigan week, every year for Michigan week, it's LL Cool J blasting throughout the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, A Time for War. and it's nonstop 24/7. And so somebody was asking Cooper, like, there's like 15 years of age difference between Day and Meyer-ish, 12, 15. Is there a cultural difference? And Cooper said, they do listen to different music. And I asked him, well, will the music still be the same Michigan week? Meaning, will it still be LL Cool J? And he's like, oh yeah, it's going to be LL Cool J, and nobody likes it. But you wouldn't have it any other way for Michigan week, because that's what you would come to expect. If they were to show up like the Sunday after the Penn State game,
yes,
the Sunday before Michigan, and there's no LL Cool J going on, that would be jarring, and they would know something is different. And when it comes to the rivalry, why would you want anything to be different?
Right. You don't. I think that you may have seen on Thursday the guy on the other side of the rivalry maybe trying to change something with some things that Jim Harbaugh said that were very out of character and unlike stuff that most college football coaches will say, and unlike stuff that he has, he goes out of his way to not say anything. And then he talked about Urban Meyer, every time he leaves a place, it's in chaos or whatever. Controversy, yes. So, maybe that's the guy on the other side of the rivalry trying to change things up. For Ohio State, there's no reason to change things up. They just won 62-39. They just won the Big Ten for the second year in a row. It's the entire point of keeping Ryan Day in and keeping the behind-the-scenes staff all together was, yep, things are going great. I don't see any reason to change anything. So I don't think that they're going to suddenly decide. And since Ryan Day's come in, recruiting's going pretty well. So it sure doesn't seem like there's any need for any kind of imminent change. Yeah, and I asked Day about Jeff Hafley's recruiting, with a slow start, quote unquote slow start, with one defensive recruit in June, and then they added a bunch. And he said that he told Jeff Hafley back when they were with, I guess, maybe the 49ers, that he would be a great head coach someday, and because he would be a great recruiter someday because of the way he relates to players, and even that Day knew Hafley would be awesome recruiting, even though he hasn't been in college for 7 years. But he knew he would, step right back in, and he has. The run they're on right now is pretty good, and they might have to take a break because of no more room for a while. Their biggest problem is they don't have enough room for all of the 4- and 5-star prospects that may want to join the class.
There's also some talk about Ryan Day having a chip on his shoulder. You know how coaches like the teams that have their chip on their shoulder, the Ohio State defense does, and it becomes a cliche. But when the head coach is a guy who, as we've said here, he can't possibly be Urban Meyer. He can't possibly live up to that. He hears that, and that's why he said in the past, like, well, why not? You can't possibly beat Michigan again, and you can win a national title. Well, what if I do? And that's a pretty good attitude to have in year one for a new coach.
Yeah, and he has done everything you could possibly have asked him to do to this point.
Yeah,
I mean, I think 6 months ago, I would have said there's no way you could continue the level of recruiting that Urban Meyer has set at Ohio State. I mean, that's just realistically, that's not a realistic bar to set for them, because that is an unprecedented level of recruiting success. And so far, he has matched it, or
number 2 class,
maybe
right
exceeded in some ways, exceeded that. And
they don't pay the players like everybody else.
There's still other guys who are kind of in the pipeline who are probably coming very shortly, and so, like you said, he is. Why can't I? And so, okay, why can't he continue recruiting like Urban Meyer? And again, this is the time of year when everyone is optimistic, and Ryan Day hasn't lost a game as head coach yet. And at some point, I mean, I'm going to be the real voice of pessimism here. At some point during his coaching career at Ohio State, Ryan Day may trail a game at halftime.
Okay. Well,
I didn't want to be blasphemous. I mean,
but it's close. It's like 3 points, right?
Yeah, it's close. Yeah, and it was a bad call for sure. That's for sure.
Coaches are screwing it up.
Yeah, that's how it happened. At some point, it is not going to be all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows forever. At some point, they may lose a football game. At some point, they may not get a recruit, and that's fine. But so far, it is going this is like the 99th percentile outcome of how the first 8 months of the Ryan Day era would be going.
Yeah, it's similar to the start of the Urban Meyer era. Mm-hmm. Without the NCAA cloud hanging over, but like everything goes as well as it can. Aside from losing 15 quarterbacks and bringing in 15 new quarterbacks.
One thing, while we're talking about the quarterbacks, really interesting story from KJ Hill today. He said that while he was someone asked him, when did you find out that Justin Fields was coming to Ohio State? And he said Ryan Day told him while they were in California for the Rose Bowl, because Hill had a decision coming up that, is he going to come back for his senior year? Is he going to turn pro with the other three guys that he spent the last 4 years with? And he said, at that point, he was pretty sure Haskins was going pro. He said he was pretty sure Haskins was going pro after the Maryland game. Like that was, he was pretty sure. I think we were all pretty sure, but he said he was pretty sure at that point.
I was pretty sure after Oregon State.
Yeah, I mean, that was a possibility at that point. And he said he had heard rumors that Tate Martell might be leaving too. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, how many quarterbacks do we have? You're going to have Tristan Chugginoff and Matthew Baldwin, and that's it. And, does he want to stick around if the quarterback's situation is that kind of unsettled? And he said Day told him Justin Fields is coming. And that was it wasn't the sole motivator for him coming back, but that was part of the decision to come back. Was, hey, there's this guy coming, and if you've seen his highlight reel, that's the kind of guy that wide receivers would want to play with.
Yeah, and Justin Fields was a topic of conversation a lot today, and we don't need to go talk too much about it because we've got 6,000 more shows to do over the next 6,000 weeks where we could talk about him plenty then. But you are getting, it's not just Ohio State media here, obviously, it's media from all over the conference and all over the national writers as well are asking about Justin Fields, and one of them, said, basically, comes over and says, tell me about Justin Fields, and Ryan Day is like, where to start,
Well, he plays football.
and then really you just go through this list of all of this potential that he has, and it's one of the things that I'm looking forward to watching most this year because it's not unknown, but there is still some question, and it's always fun to watch new guys emerge, and I think he'll be that. You talk to KJ, I talked to Jonathon Cooper, Caroline talked to KJ, Jordan Fuller, and we would have her here as well, but we only have two mics. It's not a, that's my bad.
It's a logistical issue, not
it's
not a personnel issue.
Yeah, and I thought it was an hour for every player, and it was nonstop conversation for all of them, and they are ready for the season, ready to get started with camp. Jonathon Cooper, I don't know. I'm assuming Jordan Fuller is the same way. Not that he's tired of answering questions about last year, but he is ready for this year to start so that he can be answering questions about this year. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to say at that point, but I could have be like, but Jonathon, we're still going to remind you about last year, and be like, why couldn't you play like this last year? Mm-hmm. And he was trying to be very diplomatic in why things didn't go smoothly last year in all areas. And we have all three of those videos from all of the players up at theozone.net. By the time you hear this, you'll have 3 hours of players you can watch video-wise.
An hour 15 of Ryan Day. If you want to spend 4 hours and 15 minutes watching interviews, it's all up there.
Yeah, and the weekend is coming up, so just a productive day overall. Anything else from KJ Hill that you found interesting?
A couple things. Just I'm scrolling through my Twitter timeline right now. He was asked about the story about Brett Bielema calling Ohio State to try and cancel his official visit. Saying, KJ said he doesn't want to go on the official visit anymore. And he smiled.
Is his mother.
He said, his exact quote was, I can't speak on that right now. And he said it with a big smile. And they said, but it's a really good story. And he goes, oh, it is, but I can't speak on that right now. So that was one of those things I was really excited when we kind of divided up who we're going to talk to. That was like the first thing I was like, yes, I'm going to ask him about him, and Steve Hellwagon beat me to it. But yeah,
you think is that a legal thing? Is that just OSU saying let's just not talk about it?
It's probably a whole can of worms that you don't want to spray all over. KJ Hill said Like I said, Justin Fields knew that playbook from very early in the season. Two different times, he was asked about young guys who have kind of stood out in that wide receiver room. And it was two names I wasn't necessarily expecting because, if I say young wide receivers who are going to stand out, everyone who's listening right now is going, well, Garrett Wilson's obviously number one, and that wasn't one of the names he said. He said Jalen Harris and Elijah Gardner. Now, those are two guys who are third-year players who have not done a whole heck of a lot. I think Jalen Harris may have had one catch last year, and Elijah
he's got
Gardner,
two in his career, and
Gardner has maybe one. Maybe. But he said, KJ Hill said, they have looked like, quote, like a grown man instead of a kid this offseason. And those are a couple guys at Ohio State we'd really like to see take another step forward because those are big-bodied receivers. They don't have, you've got Ben Victor at that X position, but Austin Mack is not super tall. If you have that 6'5" Jalen Harris X, that's a weapon. And Elijah Gardner is right around that 6'5" height as well. If one of those guys is a step forward, that's a big deal. Because earlier in the day, Ryan Day was talking about the wide receivers and said they really want to try and get that 6 or 7 man wide receiver rotation again. Because that is something that has driven Ohio State fans crazy in the past. But you saw last year, hey, when they've got 6 or 7 good wide receivers, and it's really like a good, legitimate, even rotation, that pays off at the end of the game because the other team is not rotating its defensive backs. So then all of a sudden you've got receivers with fresh legs in the fourth quarter when the other team is running out of gas, and you hit some. And then Paris Campbell goes streaking 78 yards against Michigan.
And the rotation was something I asked Jonathon Cooper about. I asked him, can the defensive ends get back to the rotation they had in 2017 where it was 4 legitimate guys in there as co-starters? And he said he believes they will because of the amount of depth, with Tyreek Smith, Tyler Friday, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Zach Harrison, Noah Potter. And he was going through all of these names, and he's like, and chasing myself. So there's...
oh, by the way,
yes,
Chase Young.
Exactly. And so I asked him about Javonte, and I've said this on the show before. The first time I remember watching him work out after practice last year, and he looked more like Benjamin Victor than a defensive end. And then we saw him this spring, and he's still a little thin, but he looked like a defensive end. And Cooper is his big brother on the team. All of the veterans have little brothers that they take under their wings. And I asked him about the process of Javonte to be able to take that growth on and become that player that it looked like he was in the spring. And he said it didn't start until he started accepting the criticism and putting it to use, applying it and getting better. Because he didn't like the criticism when he was a freshman. It wasn't until you get to a point in the year where you realize they're not just saying, dude, you suck. They're saying, dude, you need to work on this so that it'll make you better. And then once he started doing that and obviously getting stronger and just getting more acclimated to, Cooper said he became a man over that year and is now understanding that criticism from your coaches isn't a slam. It's because they want you out on the field, and the only way to get you out on that field is to critique you. And he's applying that. And, we saw him in the spring, and he looked like he could play anywhere in the Big Ten.
He popped a little bit during some of those practices, and I think during the spring game as well. And one other, this is just one of those little data points. It doesn't mean anything by itself, but when you take all this other stuff kind of together, he changed jerseys. He's one of the players to change jerseys this year, and he went from 38, I think he was wearing last year. He's wearing 8 now. They do not give out those single-digit jerseys to just anyone. Yeah. You don't want to read too much into that, but if that's something that, given some of the other circumstantial stuff that we've seen and heard from different people, he's maybe one of those kind of dark horse guys that could be a player that a lot more people know his name.
So you don't want to read too much into it, but the last defensive end who wore number 8 was Noah Spence. Mm-hmm. So this could go one of two ways, but end in the NFL, which would be fine.
Which would be, eventually. Hopefully Eastern Kentucky is not somewhere between here and there.
Yeah, so he's a player I'm excited to watch. We talked to anything else from Day that you found interesting or that you wanted to touch on?
One thing that I thought was interesting, he was talking about recruiting and how recruiting's going really well and why recruiting's growing really well. And he said that one of their big things is they want what they tell you during recruiting is what you experience when you're a player. They don't want it to be you get told one thing and then you show up and it's like, okay, thanks for committing, suckers. Now we've got you. And he said basically that was something that people did in the past. Like, he said basically, as soon as the parents are driving away, it's like, well, you're here now, so welcome to boot camp. And he said basically with the transfer portal, you kind of can't do that anymore because it's a lot easier for guys if they're in that first season and it's like, nope, this is not what I signed up for. It's a lot easier to kind of pull the ripcord and get out. And you would like to think that this is also kind of the right thing to do when you're not selling someone a bill of goods and when you're recruiting them and telling them this is what life is going to be like, this is actually what life is going to be like. Yeah. But what he said and what KJ Hill said is you can't, you're talking to the players. The players are going to tell you what it's really like. Like the coaches can say whatever they're going to say, but the players are going to tell you what it's like. And KJ Hill said when they had that big recruiting weekend in June, they had all the recruits come and watch them work out. It's like, well, you want to see what our workouts are like? Here we go. This is what our workouts are like. And they just went through a full workout, including what they call the Team Up North drill, which is kind of the end of practice when you're real tired and you don't want to, you're basically done. It's like, well, got to push through because you've got to get ready for the Michigan
207 days until Michigan. Let's do 207 push-ups right now.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting talking to PJ Fleck. He said that he got some of the best advice he ever got was from Jim Tressel, who told him your first hire should be your strength coach, and he should be exactly like you personality-wise because you are the two people who build the culture, and you can't have opposite mindsets because it confuses the players. And so when I heard that, I was thinking about Urban and Mickey Marotti, who are just cerebral taskmasters, perfectionists, like don't need sleep. And it's an interesting thing to then Ryan Day has to come into this and not necessarily fit what Mickey Marotti does, but they still have to mesh. And I think that one of the reasons that Urban Meyer was comfortable handing Ohio State off to Ryan Day is because he does mesh with everything that was here before him. He meshes with Marotti, and it seems like there's been a seamless transition there as well. And it's important that everything around Ryan Day is working just as hard as he is. That's how you keep things going smoothly.
Right. Well, and this is one of the things that the advantages of keeping things in-house is, when you go on a job interview and they offer you the job and it's like, I think I would like working there, but I've met these people for 2 hours. Ryan Day has been in those walls in the WAC for a couple of years now. There is no mystery as to what kind of person he is. There's no mystery, to him, what kind of people are around him. He knows how they do stuff. He knows why they do stuff. He knows the kind of people they are. He knows the personalities, all of that stuff. That is going to make that a much smoother transition, and that's going to, even if Urban and Ryan aren't necessarily the same kind of people, personality-wise, that still makes that a much easier transition than if it's just some guy walking in off the street and going, so what was your name, Marky?
Yeah. But you can be different people personality-wise and be similar in terms of what your expectations and how you operate with as a team leader. One of the stories that I'm working on is I went around and asked the head coaches about their first year as a head coach and then what they missed about being an assistant coach. And there were 3 consistent answers. Well, 2 consistent answers and then an outlier from PJ Fleck, which makes total sense. But mainly it was you missed the camaraderie of your position group. You missed those players and being in your dark film room watching and learning and teaching. The other was, I think it was Tom Allen was like, everything is your problem now. You can't go home at night and work. I've got my corners are fine. As a position coach, I'm cool. As a head coach, everything is your concern. And that was the one thing that Ryan Day said. I asked him, what do you think you're going to miss about being an assistant coach? And he's like, you can't just go home and leave a problem with the head coach. Now everything falls on you. But PJ Fleck said what he missed most is coaching. Because 95% of your time as an assistant is coaching. 95% of your time as a head coach is not coaching. And So it's going to be a transition for Ryan Day, but he's already experienced it, which I think makes this entire transition easier.
Yeah, he's not a long-time veteran head coach. There's still going to be some first-time adjustments for him, and he talked about the fact that every once in a while he'll kind of have the holy smokes, I'm the head coach of Ohio State kind of like, wow. And he said you can't dwell on that because you get too much stuff to do. So you can't live in that feeling too often, but he still has that a little bit. And that's just, I think this is a little bit like, being the president. Like, they can tell you what it's like, but you don't really know what it's like until it's too late and you're in there, and now you're doing it. Now you're swimming.
Now they're showing you the presidential book of secrets, and you're learning about aliens and the George Washington assassination, and now you've just been, your mind has been expanded. Tom, any closing arguments before we head out of here?
One final thing when you go through an hour with these players, you get to ask a lot of questions that would never get asked any other time of year.
I've got plenty of those.
And there was about 57 minutes into the KJ Hill interview, someone sat down and asked him about uniforms. And he said there was a school recruiting him. He did not say which one, but he said there was a school recruiting him that he just scratched off his list because they were an Under Armour school, and he did not want to go to an Under Armour school. He wanted to.
Crazy.
He's always been a Nike guy. He wanted to wear Nikes. He wanted to. He just scratched it off his list, and I don't know which Under Armour school it was, but I was listening to that and thinking, how on earth did Georgia Tech get any recruits at all? Because they were a Russell athletic school.
Calvin Johnson always wanted to be a Russell athletic guy.
So say we all.
The stupid question, not stupid questions, the questions that we get to ask, like at probably the 57-minute mark of Cooper, we're talking about BB Landers, and I asked him, can you pull off the cowboy hat like BB can? And he's like, I can do it better. I'm like, oh, really? You think so? I don't know. Because Robert Landers is, he's pretty special.
He is. Robert Landers is one of a kind.
Yeah.
And Jonathon Cooper, when he was done in the other room, came in and sat down in the front row next to me, and asked KJ Hill a couple questions, because anyone can be a reporter. It's easy.
It's easy.
And he asked KJ Hill what he was doing to win the respect of Jonathon Cooper, and KJ Hill said he wasn't worried about that because Jonathon Cooper's face was too narrow. So you learn a lot of things at these media days, and most of the best stuff comes about more than 55 minutes in.
Yeah, it's true, because everybody, the guard is down. There are no more questions to ask, and now you just ask. And a lot of times, and it sucks when you ask stuff to maybe get, it's really stupid stuff, to maybe get an interesting answer, to get another view of the player. A lot of times it ends up being just bad, but you do what you can.
When you ask the questions that you actually want answers to,
Yeah.
You never get answers, because I went and I talked to a couple of Nebraska players about the Ohio State game. So what is, that's obviously early in the season. This is a chance you guys are talking about how this is you really want to rebuild that championship tradition. You've got the champions coming into your house, potential for a big statement, hey, Nebraska's back kind of game. What's on the table for you there? And literally got one game at a time. Just pull the college football cliches, speak and say, and it spins and points to one game at a time.
Well, and Jonathon Cooper couldn't have had more fun talking, and it was open and laughing and making fun of people. And then somebody asks him about Nebraska. I think maybe a reporter who covers Nebraska asked him about the importance of this game and his memories of the last game. And he's like, we take everybody seriously. We play our hardest for everybody. We expect everybody's hardest when they come play us. And then he moves on, and it's like, yeah, all right. But you're not going to get what you want.
There's a reason that they send the players to this event that they do. Everyone who has come here has gone through the media, the Clockwork Orange style media training.
They've been vetted.
Yes, they know. They know what to say and what not to say, and they don't say the stuff they're not supposed to say.
All right. I think that'll do it, because we've got a long drive back to
Columbus. That's where we live.
Oh, man, that's true. That is so far away. Anyway, we will. I'll go ahead and get this posted ASAP, which means pretty quickly. and we'll try to get this out to you guys. So thank you all for listening. We will be back next week on our regular schedule, softball depending, weather depending, allergies depending, who knows. But we'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you for listening this week.